You know, Steve, one of the things that I really appreciate about you is you're saying that you don't need to be a TV star. You don't need to have a great gift from God of healing. All you need is the teaching of the Word and doing it. Really, people see blind eyes open, deaf ears open, the crippled walking, the dead raised, and they don't have any special gifts?
And they don't have any special gifts, Sid. You know, even in the last few weeks, as I've been to about 5 or 6 nations, I've watched people who come with me from all over the developed world with no training. I spend a day with them, and we get out, and in the last few weeks, I can't even tell you how many blind eyes opened, how many deaf ears opened, the mute speaking, because it's our inheritance.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I've always been told you have to work up your faith. You start with a headache, then you work for about 5 or 6 years to get deaf ears open. You don't see that as a necessity, do you?
Absolutely not.
Really?
You know, I think of a guy, Rick, who we did some training in Africa, and we finished early. I said, why don't you guys just go out and pray for somebody? And he went out, and he only made it about 300 yards, and he found a kid who was born completely deaf, and the Lord opened his ears. He didn't have any track record. He just had discovered by spending a day together that this is part of his inheritance.
Now, you're a spiritual father. You mentored a gentleman that has a work in India.
Yes.
What did he do?
Oh, he's done wonderful things. He started with just him and his wife, and he now has over 600,000 in his church.
Did you get that? 600,000, starting with just him and his wife. Now that is growth.
That is serious growth, and it's all about multiplication, not addition. You know, just in the last 3.5 months, and I checked with him just before this show. He has started another 5,020 churches, over 200,000 people in the last 3.5 months. So God is moving in a remarkable, remarkable way. Last year, he baptized 150,000 people, and this year it will be more than that.
There is a story you tell that it got to me. You talk about praying for a deaf mute and God speaking to you. I've seen the
Lord do that so many times. But when I prayed for that man, here's what happened. I took a team. We were in Mexico, actually. I took a team, and the first night there was a word of knowledge, and an 11-year-old boy was brought forward who had been mute his entire life. And one of the team prayed for him, not me, and he instantly spoke. Sid, it was like flicking a light switch. He just spoke fluently. The next night I was in another town. After I preached the gospel, people came forward. A lot of people came forward. And as I began to pray and ask the Holy Spirit to just come and fill them, and it was a 13-year-old girl who'd been deaf since she was 3 when she got meningitis. And suddenly her ears were opened. She was crying. Her mother was crying. Everybody was just excited. I felt this sadness come over me, and I couldn't understand it. So I stepped back. Nobody was looking at me. They were looking at what was going on there. And I said,
Papa, why do I feel sad?
And he said something I'll never forget. It was one of those markers in my life. He said to me, remember the boy last night who couldn't speak and then he could? I said, sure.
Sure.
He says, and you see that girl who was deaf and now she can hear? I said, yes, Papa. He said to me, I have been waiting for years to do that, but nobody would release it.
That was the statement that got to me.
Sid, how much is heaven waiting to release in all our towns and our cities, just waiting for us to release it?
You do seminars where you teach people how to release the power of God. And there was a young boy in the seminar, just 9 years old. He was there just because he was waiting to go to school. That was in India. But something dramatic happened to him. He picked up a lot more than most people would have thought.
It was interesting. We thought he was sleeping in the back on the pew. And, but he'd been learning. The next day after school, he burst in the front door.
Amma!
And he said to his mother, it works. I did what Uncle said. And he prayed for a friend who'd been chronically sick, and he was healed. 2 days later, I took him, little 9-year-old Abhishek, and some other young people to a very remote Indian village. And I started to tell them about Jesus. A crowd gathered. And then I had these young people start to pray for the sick. And 9-year-old Abhishek prayed for a 35-year-old man who'd been deaf his whole life, and his ears opened, and it caused a move of God in that whole village.
I would like to know the very first person you prayed for that was sick. What happened?
It was in 1977, and I was a new believer. I got a phone call. My friend's sister had been in a car accident. She had broken vertebrae, crushed discs. Would I please come and pray for her? I'd never prayed for anyone. I'd prayed for supper. That's about it. I went to the house. I was nervous, trying to pretend I wasn't. They're all looking at me, and I went to pray for her, and someone said, aren't you going to anoint her with oil? And I'm thinking, what is that? But on the outside, I said, oh, yes, of course.
Oh, yes, of course.
And somebody got me a bottle of Crisco.
Got the oil.
And I just let her have it because I didn't know any different. So I prayed what might have been one of the slipperiest prayers, I'm sure. And I prayed, and it was rather pathetic prayer, just kind of mumbled, and I was so nervous. And when I was done, they all looked at me like, that's it? And the Lord instantly healed her. And in fact, there was a series of...
Were you shocked?
You bet. I was really shocked.
Thank God.
Praise the Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus.
For one thing, he would have learned that what we expect is what we see. And the more we see, the more we expect. So it's a positive spiral. And he would have also heard what I shared earlier, that whatever we release is what gets released from heaven, which is what Jesus told Peter in Matthew 16:19. And this whole thing of God wanting to release the kingdom through us. He also would have heard about the delight of God. This is such a key for me. Let me tell you briefly. I was doing a healing conference in Seoul, Korea, and a mother brought her 20-year-old son to me. He had rheumatoid arthritis. His knees were all swelled up. So I knelt down to pray for him, and as I started to pray for him and I could feel things moving around, nobody noticed me because of all that was going on in the room. But for me, it was as if the room became silent. And I heard the Father say to me, you really love doing this, don't you? I said, yes, Papa, I do. And he said to me too. And at that moment, I just had this aha. He delights in healing. And he delights in me, Sid, when I'm healing. He made me to pray for the sick as he made every believer. And when I'm doing it, I enter into his delight. Can I tell you a story also in India, how that was released and changed a region? I took a team, we head up this thing called Impact Nations, and I took a team on a journey of compassion to northern India 2 years ago. I've been to India many times. We went into the hardest region in India, in the Punjab. On the first day, we did a mobile medical clinic, which we do. I believe the kingdom touches every part of life. And we were going along just fine for a couple of hours, and then a family brought their paralyzed mother. They carried her in to get medicine. While she was waiting, our prayer team prayed for her, and she was instantly healed. But what I want you to know is out of that one healing, suddenly a town of 8,000, it just turned, and we prayed for person after person after person until it was dark. Got up to preach, and they were on the roof, on the walls, they were everywhere. And out of that one journey of compassion, in that area of the Punjab, 1,000 new churches were planted.